Hello, and welcome to the Fineprint. Today we'll be discussing what is prohibition and why it simply never works from an econo-sociological point of view. Now, prohibition is simply as old as governance itself. From alcohol bans in the United States during the 1920s to the entire war on drugs that spanned continents in the late 20th century, and even Singapore's current stance on vaping. Societies have repeatedly turned to prohibition in the hope of eradicating substances deemed as harmful, but across history and geography, one truth emerges: prohibition almost never works. The reason is simple. As long as demand exists, supply will find a way. In economic terms, demand is not erased by prohibition. Knowledge of a product and its effects ensures that curiosity, desire, or dependency continues to fuel interest. Prohibition then introduces a new twist. It pushes supply underground. Sellers face higher risks, and with higher risks come higher costs. Products become more expensive, and those who remain in the game enjoy higher profits precisely because the market is now more dangerous and exclusive. This then creates a perverse incentive loop. Authorities crack down, small pushes exit, market prices rise, surviving pushes earn more and grow, and eventually larger, more organized crime networks fill the gap. What prohibition creates, in other words, is not elimination, but a criminal survival of the fittest. Now, history is littered with examples like the US alcohol prohibition in the 1920s, which gave birth to sprawling organized crime empires, such as Al Capone, that started selling alcohol underground and eventually became a guerrilla organization that will continue to plague the continent for decades. The war on drugs in Latin America empowered cartels that were better armed, better funded, and more ruthless than the states fighting them, and continues to today. In the Singaporean context, the ban on vapes has already produced a thriving black market. Enforcement agencies intercept shipments while suppliers adapt with stealthier methods. Prices climb and with them does profits. A disposable vape costing $1.50 in China can sell for between $15 and $20 here in Singapore. Now imagine those margins in truckloads of shipment. The caveat is criminal networks motivated purely by profit have no incentive in protecting consumers. In fact, the opposite is true. Be it cutting substances with harmful chemicals, exaggerating potency, and creating dependency loops to maximize sales, consumers face not only the risks of the substance itself, but also the unpredictable harms introduced by illicit production to keep the addictions going. If prohibition fails, what's the alternative, you may ask? Public health experts have long argued for harm reduction, a three pronged approach of legislation, regulation, and education. Now, legislative frameworks hold producers and sellers accountable. Just as cigarette manufacturers must disclose tar and nicotine content, regulated markets ensure consumers are informed and protected from adulterated or unsafe products. Regulative standards and oversight then create safety nets, including restrictions on the age of sale, bans on advertising, health warnings, and caps on potency. Regulation acknowledges that people will consume but ensures they do so under the safest of conditions. Through regulation, essentially, teens will stop being tempted into buying a vape because it tastes and is packaged like cotton candy. By openly discussing these risks, which works more like a conversation instead of indoctrination, governments can strip away the allure of taboo. Cigarettes and alcohol are still consumed in many developed nations, but widespread education campaigns post legislation have reduced substance abuse rates significantly. The result is paradoxical but proven. Legalization with regulation reduces harm more effectively than prohibition. At the same time, governments can also tax consumption, converting prohibition, which is a social burden, into a revenue stream used for rehabilitation and other public health programs. Why then is prohibition so politically attractive, you may think? Often because policymakers ignore the deeper reasons people consume. Whether alcohol, nicotine, sugar, or even coffee, for many they act as mental health aids. They relieve stress, numb pain, and offer stimulation. They create a positive feedback loop of pressure where users feel motivated to continue. This is why prohibition struggles. It treats the symptom, which is abuse, but ignores the cause. If a society bans alcohol but provides no effective alternative for coping with anxiety, trauma, or depression, consumption merely shifts underground as the illicit substance produces a pleasurable release for users. The rabbit hole then leads us to the uncomfortable question: where does prohibition end? If cigarettes, alcohol, sugar, and caffeine were discovered today, many experts have mentioned that they may well be banned. Yet, because they are culturally entrenched and prohibitions have failed, they are instead made into social profit through regulation and taxes. In this frame of thought, the line between illegal and legal is less about health and more about politics, the economy, and history. Now, prohibition is very seductive because it promises clarity, a clean break, a moral stance, and a way of saying this is bad and we reject it. But in practice, it rarely eliminates demand. Instead, it fuels black markets, enriches criminal networks who endanger consumers, and then burdens state resources with endless enforcement likened to a theatrical between Tom's never ending chase for Jerry. Harm reduction, legislation, regulation, and education is not perfect, but it recognizes the socio psychological reality of human behavior and economics, reducing harm both to individuals and to society at large. With that, I will catch you on the next episode of The Fine Print. Thank you very much for tuning in.